Hi, I'm Erica, and welcome to the Ultimate Guide to Pressing and Ironing. This video was put together in collaboration with several other content creators in celebration of National Quilting Day, which is March 16th. So all of the videos that are in this collaboration will be linked in my description box below. So I encourage you, everyone, to go out and check out these videos and learn something new about quilting. What I'm going to talk about is the difference between pressing and ironing. Many people don't realize that there is a difference between pressing and ironing. We tend to use those two words interchangeably, right? Well, when you're talking about ironing, you're talking about the action that we place on a large piece of fabric that has not been cut down to size yet. It's just been taken off of the bolt. You have half yard width of fabric. It's a large piece that you're eventually going to then cut down, subcut into the necessary pieces for your quilt. In a case like that, what you're going to be doing is using not only the heat of the iron and the natural weight of the iron to release those creases in the fabric, you're also going to use the pressure of your arm and the motion of the iron on your fabric. So you'll be doing a lot of this motion and action. That is what we refer to as ironing. When you use the full force and motion of the iron on your fabric, it tends to stretch and distort your fabric a little bit. You can make that action on a large piece of fabric because you haven't yet cut it down to the size that it needs to be. You are not just releasing the creases, but you're allowing for a little bit of motion and movement within that fabric prior to cutting it down. Once you have that fabric cut into its pieces, you no longer want to use the force and motion on the fabric in order to release the creases. What you want to do is press. Pressing is a totally different animal. You are just using the heat of the iron and you're using the natural weight of the iron. And what you do is, and I'll do it with this one, you apply heat, hold it for a few seconds, raise your iron, move it to another spot, and apply heat and pressure in another place. This is keeping the fabric from becoming distorted, okay? So there is that difference that we need to make sure that we keep clear so that we don't get confused and we don't stretch and distort our fabric before it's time. Now, the other thing that I want to talk to you about is the use of different tools for your ironing and your pressing. When you're ironing, you're going to use your standard ironing board. That is good for any type of ironing, especially if you're using your yardage. You're working on ironing your larger yardage pieces. It allows for that yardage to be kept up off of the ground and you're able to maneuver it very well in a large space. Another option to your standard ironing board is your wool pressing mat. I use wool pressing mats quite a bit. This one I believe is 14 by 14 inches and it is a half of an inch thick. What a wool pressing mat will do is as you apply heat to the mat, it's going to absorb that heat and push the heat up again to the back side of your block to get it nice and flat. Another tool that we use obviously is the iron. Now we can have a full-size iron or we can have a miniature iron, a small palm-sized iron. Let's talk about the large one first. So the large standard-sized iron has a lovely pointed tip at the top that allows you to get into nice small places as you're doing your pressing. It also has a lot of holes on the sole plate. It's a large sole plate. These holes are for steam. The steam is created when you put water into the reservoir, the tank that's within the iron. But here's the thing, guys. Iron manufacturers will tell you in their instructions, yes, put your water into the reservoir, but afterward you need to empty the reservoir when you're finished using your iron. That's great in theory, but in my experience, and I've been through quite a few irons in my time, there's still water that is contained in like water droplets. There's still a little bit of moisture kept inside that reservoir reservoir. That leads to rusting inside your iron, and eventually you'll start spitting out brown water out of these steam holes in the sole plate. We definitely don't want brown water coming out onto our quilt. So the solution to that is to have a bottle of water, a spray bottle of water at hand. Don't put water here, but keep it in a spray bottle so that you can mist your fabric as you're doing your pressing. So that's your full-sized iron. Another option for an iron, if you're not going to stand at a big ironing board, is to use a little palm-sized, travel-sized iron. Now, this iron also has a reservoir in it, but you can see that it's not a very large iron. It doesn't have a very big reservoir. I don't suggest putting water in this one either. The nice thing about this iron is that it is very compact. It gets to a nice hot heat, and you can use it on one of these wool pressing mats without any trouble. If you find yourself having trouble getting between your sewing station where your machine is and you have to trudge across to get to your ironing board, getting a pressing mat with a small mini iron would be a great option for you. Another tool that we use when we press and we iron our fabric, as I was saying before, is a water bottle. The water is great for just spritzing your fabric. What it will do is soften the fibers of your fabric to allow those creases to relax, and then you can come back over it with the miniature iron or your standard size iron, dry up that moisture and really crisp up your fabric again so that it no longer has those creases. You can also use a product called sizing, and that comes in a lot of different varieties. One of them is Best Press, another one is called Flatter, but the sizing is just a very light product that all fabric comes to you from the fabric store containing. It's a product that gives the fabric a little bit of body, a little bit of finish and polish to it, that you can buy in the stores. I know some people also like to use spray starch, and that's great. My only suggestion there, if you're going to use spray starch, spray it onto the back of your block. Don't spray it onto the front because it tends to flake, right? So we want to avoid that. The last tool that I want to talk to you guys about before I get into the actual process of pressing is this friend right here. This is our clapper. Clappers come in lots of different sizes and shapes. This one I like because it is large enough to cover the majority of a block that I'm making. Let me show you how the clapper works. Now, this block that I have here has a lot of seams going through it, different angles, lots of seaming. You can see on the back all of the seaming action that's going on. In a case like this, as you're putting your quilt together, it may seem a little puffy because the fabric doesn't want to lay flat. You can see how the seams kind of pop back up for as much as they were pressed. So this is what you can do. I'm going to squirt, just give a slight mist. I'll come back in and press. I'm not looking to iron, I'm pressing. Just letting the heat and the weight of the iron do its thing. And once I have it all pressed, I'm going to drop my clapper on top. It really doesn't take very long. What's happening is that the weight of the clapper is really pushing down on my block. It's also absorbing the heat from the pressing mat and from the block, so it is cooling my block underneath. When the fabric is cool, it stays in whatever position it's been placed in. Ooh, look at that friend. Oh my goodness, she's gorgeous. Okay, so you can see there's a difference. We don't have any arches where the seams are. And on the back, she's nice and flat. The clapper is a really great tool. I recommend that if you don't have one and you're quilting quite a bit, get a clapper. Like I said, they have them in different sizes and shapes, so you find the one that suits you the best. So if you guys have gotten this far in the video and you like the kind of content that I make, I'm gonna ask you if you would do me a huge favor and subscribe below. That way you'll be able to get notifications on when I bring out some new content, and you'll be able to kind of tell me what you like and what you don't like. So let's get back to it. We're gonna talk about how to press. Now in the quilting world, we have this saying that we always press our seams toward the dark side. The reason we want to press to the dark side is so that you don't have any of your darker colors or your seam allowance showing behind your lighter fabric. What does that really mean practically? It means that if I'm sewing a white block next to a red block, I'm going to press my seam allowance toward the red block so that none of that white or none of the red threads show behind my white block. Well, in theory, that's a great idea. However, in actuality, in practice, it's not always possible. Another option is to press your seams open. Pressing your seams open is a great idea because what it does is it allows for all the bulk that can build up in the intersections where those seams meet. It allows for that bulk to be dispersed. It helps with long arming. It helps with the whole process. Now, you're going to have people who will say that it lessens the integrity of your seams. And in a sense, yes, it absolutely does. If there's any tugging and pulling that happens with the block, these seams are weaker because it's only the threads holding them together. But you kind of have to stop and think, if it's going to be quilted, I'm putting it on the long arm or I'm giving it to my long armor, it's going to be quilted, stitched all over, and all of these seams are going to end up being pushed down and secured in the quilting process. So it may be for you that you don't mind having those open seams because it's going to be quilted, heavily quilted, and all of those seams where your fabrics come together will eventually be secure. Going back to pressing your seams to one side or the other, there are different ways of going about that. With this block, everything is pushed to one side or another. On these half square triangle blocks here, we have the diagonal, and that's pushed toward the darker of the two fabrics. In the 4-patch here in the middle and the corners, we have the seams just pushed over to one side. Unfortunately, in this kind of a situation where you have all the seams pushed over to just one side, it becomes very thick in the middle. So it's this space right here that ends up being bumpy on the other side, okay? It's very bumpy right here. The positive to pushing your seams to one side, for as much as you may end up with this bumpy thing in the middle, is that you're able to nest your seams. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. So I have two sample blocks here just to make a quick 4-patch. And if we look on the back, we can see that I have pressed my seam allowance toward my floral fabric and toward my floral fabric. Now I'm going to match these up and I'm going to feel right in here to make sure that my seams are touching. So what I'm going to do is pin these seam allowances on either side of the seam and sew along this longer seam to create the 4-patch all together. And then we're going to see what happens after that. Okay, I created the seam going across. And when I open it up, the intersection where those two seams come together is absolutely perfect. Now I have an option. What am I going to do with this new seam? How am I going to press this one? There's always the option to press flat in one direction. But remember, I was telling you before that what that does is it creates a lot of lumpy bumpy happening right here in the center of my block. So I want to avoid that. I could open it up and press my seams open. What that does for us is it allows for the center of the block to lay a little bit more flat. There is yet a third option with your pressing. Rather than pressing it to one side or the other, opening it up, what I'm going to do is spin the center. So this is the way it goes. I'm going to hold that seam that I want to press between my fingers very close to the intersection where my other seams converge. And I'm going to just gently open it up. What that does is it just separates the couple of stitches that are holding the fabric together in the seam allowance. When I lay it down, I'm able to make sure that all of my seams run in the same direction. This one here closest to me is going to your left. Come down to this one, I can press it so that it lays down in that direction. This bottom seam is running to your right, and the other horizontal seam, I'm going to press it so that it runs toward me. So everything travels in a circle. Well, when that happens, the center opens up and makes a cute little 4-patch of its own. Wonderful thing about that is that it allows the entire block to lay so flat and smooth. You will be amazed. Now, full disclosure, it's not possible to do that with every one of your seams. In the event that you can't, then you choose one of the other options. You either press it open or you press it to the side if that's how it goes. Within any larger quilt, you're going to have to do a combination of all of these things. Press to the dark side and to the light side. You're going to be able to press open because that's what works to make that block flat. Sometimes you'll be able to do this lovely little trick and spin that seam so that everything goes in the same direction. That's so fun to do. Everything goes in the same direction and the center lays flat in a 4-patch as well. If you have questions, I would love to hear from you. Drop me a comment below and I will be happy to get back to you. Don't forget to subscribe and please, please, please watch the other videos that the other content creators have made in collaboration with this one so that we can celebrate National Quilting Day together and learn and grow as a community. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and I will see you in my next one. Bye.